A New York Congresswoman is calling for an FBI investigation into the supposed threat posed by the animal rights group Direct Action Everywhere, also known as DXE. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney sent a letter Thursday to FBI Director Christopher Wray, urging the FBI to investigate and prosecute those involved with the so-called promotion of organized criminal activity by vegan extremists. Reading now from the letter, Dear Director Wray, I write today with serious concerns about the criminal activity being promoted by the group Direct Action Everywhere. Direct Action Everywhere is headquartered in California and has been actively participating in meetings within the rural communities to fundraise and recruit others to actively disrupt farms across the country. In the recent year, local law enforcement agencies within my congressional district in Niagara County, New York, have reported several instances of animal theft and trespassing by groups outside of the community. In the past week, the Niagara County Sheriff's Office has asked farmers to keep vigilant for trespassers on their property. She goes on to say, it is unacceptable for the struggling family to now have the added burden of unlawful entry, destruction of their property, we'll get to that, and theft of their livestock, we'll also get to that. This group on their website glorifies their court cases in progress and promotes, quote, trigger events to further their cause. Promotion of organized criminal activity cannot be tolerated. Taking here from the Trump Style Guide on Capitalization, she says, basic constitutional rights must be upheld and basic property rights must be protected. I urge the FBI to send a clear message that compliance with federal law is not a choice but an obligation, and that those who promote non-compliance will be held accountable. Furthermore, I request any assistance the FBI can offer our local law enforcement agencies in gathering intelligence on the perpetrators and holding those who violate our laws accountable. So what's this all about? It stems from a troubling situation which started last year, in which Tracy Murphy, the 59-year-old owner of Asha Farm Sanctuary in upstate New York, took in a cow who was found running loose in the area. With no knowledge of where the animal came from, Murphy did what any animal lover would naturally want to do and provided care for the cow. And as an animal lover, particularly one who had spent time with the animal and formed a bond, she was in no rush to voluntarily comply when police contacted her with a warrantless request to locate and seize the animal and return her to whatever conditions she ran away from. However, the police did eventually get that search warrant to seize the cow, and they did so, as well as arresting Murphy on charges of grand larceny. She now faces a felony prosecution which could land her in prison for up to 7 years. At her arraignment last August, Murphy was seen shackled around both her waist and her wrists, something which is not standard operating procedure, particularly for an offender facing a nonviolent criminal charge. So why focus the Congresswoman's ire on DXE? Well, seeing this process play out, DXE stepped up to assist in Murphy's defense, providing legal support, as well as elevating the case as part of the group's ongoing Right to Rescue campaign, which seeks to empower ordinary people to help sick and injured animals, as well as to influence legislators and prosecutors to act in the interest of both distressed animals and those trying to provide aid. Think about dog in a hot car scenario. If there's a dog locked in a hot car on a hot day, many states have laws protecting ordinary people to want to go in and break out the glass of a window and rescue a dog. That's not considered theft. That's not considered vandalism in the right circumstances. And I think ordinary people agree, like, hey, we should, help out this poor dog. And this is extending that logic to other animals. Anywhere animals are in, really bad shape, and you have credible information about that, we should be able to help them. So I want to move now to setting the story straight about DXE. The Congresswoman speaks of destruction of property. Citation needed on that one. Not sure what she's referring to, and I do know a lot about Direct Action Everywhere, so I'm not a lawyer. I'm not in touch with DXE's legal team, but that particular claim seems actionable. But I digress. That's not the central point here. What does DXE do? As I mentioned, they're promoting this idea of the right to rescue, of what they call open rescuing animals. When animals are sick and injured, whether it be a dog in a hot car, whether it be animals inside of factory farms somewhere that are in need of care, DXE is very much promoting, and I think any person of conscience would promote, hey, let's help those animals out. Let's do that. DXE also promotes documenting and reporting of criminal animal abuse, which I can tell you is running rampant in factory farms and throughout animal agriculture across the country. Not something that you would think that someone like Congresswoman Tenney would take issue with, documenting and reporting criminal activity. These sorts of cases just tend to not get prosecuted. So, Congresswoman Tenney, I'm with you. Let's get the FBI to crack down on criminal activity. I have years worth of unanswered emails to DAs and county attorneys across the country reporting criminal animal abuse in factory farms. As she says, hey, compliance with the law, it's not a choice, but it's an obligation. So, hey, let's make it happen. Not holding my breath on that one. Even when corporate entities that are inflicting abuse on animals, when they're violating the law, suddenly we have a two-tiered justice system, which we'll get to here in relation to the Congresswoman momentarily. More about what DXE is all about. The group is also principally nonviolent in the tradition of Martin Luther King, Gandhi, various social movements throughout history that we look back upon and lionize these leaders for, and rightfully so, for leading these movements in a way which is inspiring and nonviolent and really transformative in so many ways. Now, as it relates to the FBI, Congresswoman Tenney gets it exactly backwards. She tweeted very much vilifying the FBI for its involvement in raiding Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago. I'm not going to go into great detail about that, but there's a lot that's right about that situation. People in power should be challenged, and it's an affirmation of our legal process when people with power are once in a great while held accountable for what they do and are just subject to the law as written. So that's not an example of FBI overreach. And what is an example of FBI overreach? She's on the exact opposite side of it. That's the situation at hand here, where she is calling on the FBI to weaponize these resources and to go after peaceful animal rights activists. As far as telling the FBI that the FBI needs to go investigate, learn more information about DXE, about the animal rights movement, well, Congresswoman Tenney, I got news for you. The FBI already knows all about DXE and the rest of the animal rights movement, but I am happy to provide some transparency here. In fact, the FBI has a decades-long history of targeting animal rights activists. During the late 2000s, animal rights and environmental activists were deemed the nation's top domestic terrorist threat, despite never killing a single person. Yet this pretext of activists as terrorists, extremists, etc., has been and continues to be used by industry and political actors like Congresswoman Tenney to justify the FBI in surveilling, infiltrating, and harassing peaceful animal rights activists. This attack on peaceful activists in the early 2000s led to the passage of the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act, which defines even peaceful civil disobedience as terrorism if such acts occur in relation to animal agriculture. The AETA passed with broad bipartisan consensus, co-authored between a Republican and a Democrat, the Democrat being California's own Dianne Feinstein, co-sponsoring that bill. And this was also at a time period in which the SHAC campaign happened. Some of you may be familiar with that. Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty. This was a campaign in the UK and the United States in which a lot of grassroots activists rose up to protest some really horrific experiments being done on dogs. And unfortunately, 6 folks who were organizers with the SHAC campaign ended up serving prison time. This was actually under the AEPA, the Animal Enterprise Protection Act, the 1992 predecessor of the AETA, which was later modified and added to and weaponized in the wake of 9/11. Now they switch out the word animal protection with terrorism. Nice little scare word. Another example, which I won't go into too much detail here because I did speak about it in my prior video, so folks can check that out. The FBI actually raided farm animal sanctuaries looking for, in a situation not so unlike this situation, they're looking for 2 sick and dying piglets that were rescued from a Smithfield factory farm. Huge waste of taxpayer resources. completely inappropriate weaponization of the FBI to target people who are critical of factory farming. Another example, which is really relevant to me personally, the FBI in 2020 approached a truck driver with Iowa Select Farms. This was a man who had passed along information that eventually led to myself with a team of some other activists exposing this horrific practice known as ventilation shutdown, where this company was roasting animals alive. I encourage folks to check that out. It's like depressing, but it's absolutely something people should know about. Here we see again, the FBI is on exactly the wrong side of this. They're swift to take action, not against the animal cruelty, but to try to get this whistleblower to flip. They're asking him if he's willing to sell drugs, if he's willing to wear a wire, to try to get him to entrap me in some sort of wrongdoing. Completely inappropriate and over the top. I encourage folks to look into that whole situation a lot more. A final example here I'll give, which is more recent, and we haven't really talked about that much. The FBI actually has been monitoring Direct Action Everywhere under its Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate. Yeah. So putting DXE in the same category is one of the most inflammatory kind of labels, terms in all of politics. Well, I don't know. Terrorism, weapons of mass destruction. They're both kind of apparently apply according to the FBI. The whole notion behind this so-called weapons of mass destruction monitoring is that Direct Action Everywhere does these investigations inside of factory farms, and from the FBI's very poorly researched perspective, this is something that poses a great risk to these factory farms. Now, as I've said before, there's a great risk, a great biohazard to factory farms, and it's called factory farms. And the notion that on the very rare event that somebody who is documenting what's happening inside of these places goes in there, there is some, bit of risk anytime anybody goes in and out of a place as disgusting, place that's a petri dish for these kind of diseases. But specifically to, the very rare instance of animal rights activists, as opposed to business as usual in factory farming, really kind of misaligning their focus there and, not exactly an accident. So really, this is it's just a simply outrageous state of affairs, and one which we will be following closely for you as the situation continues to unfold.